The Inspector General of Police, Kayode Ebetokun, has said that all measures, including non-kinetic, will be applied towards ensuring the safe return of school children abducted in Kaduna State. Arise correspondent Nisi Gabriel tells us more.
On March 7, 2024, armed bandits stormed the LEA Primary and Secondary School in Kuriga, Chikun local government area of Kaduna State, abducting over 200 school children. Nigeria's Inspector General of Police is in Kaduna 5 days after the incident to assure the state government that all strategies are being deployed to ensure the safe return of the school children. The police chief says a special intervention squad will soon be launched in Kaduna, adding that a mobile police base has been deployed to Kuriga community to restore the confidence of locals.
We are launching the special intervention squad for Kaduna State. We scheduled this launching for the month of April of this year, which is next month. That was the original time I was planned to visit Kaduna. But this unfortunate incident of school abduction had fast-tracked my visit to this state today. I have instructed the AIG PMF to immediately deploy a unit of PMF to that community, if only to give confidence to the people. The men will be deployed, and with the support that you have pledged to give, I'm sure that the community will start to feel safe again.
Governor Obas expresses confidence in the abilities of security forces to rescue the school children unhurt, while cautioning the media once again to refrain from reports that will jeopardize rescue efforts.
I'm also happy with the decision by the Inspector of Police to quickly deploy a mobile base in our Kuriga community. He has assured me that will happen in the next few days, and as a government, we will provide them with accommodation, with everything to ensure that the police, the mobile police that will be deployed to Kuriga community well kept there without any problem. The media went out with a very sensational report about Kaduna State government hiring any person to negotiate. We don't do that in Kaduna State. We always rely on the expertise of the security agencies in Nigeria. They're very capable. We'll support them, and by the grace of God, we'll succeed in bringing the children back home.
This is his first official visit to Kaduna State since his appointment as the Inspector General of Police. The Kaduna State government also says significant progress has been made in rescue efforts to release the over 200 kidnapped school children. Nisi Gabriel, Arise News, Kaduna.
To make sense of all of this, I'm joined now in the studio by experts in the field of security and counterterrorism. I have Professor Ali Alao, a visiting fellow senior lecturer at the Nigerian Defense Academy, who is also a cybersecurity and technology management. Also with me, David Otto, international defense and security specialist. He is also a certified master anti-terrorism specialist. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on Arise Prime Time. Now, let's begin with the response of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to this. And what we took out of that response was that, look, the federal government is not going to pay a dime for the release of this 280 children and teachers that were kidnapped. What are your thoughts or assessments of his response to this? I'll start with you, Mr. David Otto.
Well, I think, that's the government policy. The government, and again the president has made it very clear that the government will not pay any ransom. The question now is what kind of measures will be put in place to get the release of these children. Chibok 2014, 10 years down the line, this was a situation where never again, but what we have here is ever again. The government has to get a grip of the situation. The reaction in terms of a pursuit or a response or the refusal to pay ransom, it's a reactive strategy. Now the question that parents would be asking, Because if you're a parent, you want to know how safe will my children or child be returned back to me. The government has definitely failed in protecting the children. It has failed in protecting education. It has failed in protecting the society. So the question is, what measures will we put in place for the safe return of these children? So this is the big question. Of course, you know, the rhetoric which the government has said it will not pay ransom. It's good, but the question is, how do you get them to be released? You know, so that's where I think the critical question would be. And how do you make sure that these almost 20 mass kidnappings that have taken place across the country, 10 years down the line, how do you get a grip on them? You know, what are the security agencies doing? What are the traditional authorities doing? Remember that the wings of the traditional authorities has been clipped. They find themselves in a position where they are no longer respected by the government. They can be dethroned or anytime. So I think we need to go back to a point, you know, I know I'm coming to a solution quite quickly, but I think we need to go back to a point where the government has to look into where does this crime take place? It takes place at the local level. And who is responsible for these local areas? The traditional leaders. They need to wake up. They need to be given the positions that they have, you know, been ordained by tradition to do. And I think, you know, this is where the government has to begin to look. Now, the idea that the government is not going to pay ransom, the question is, how do you get these children released safely? That's what parents will be asking. That's what these children who are in the hands of unknown gunmen or terrorists would be asking.
And that's the big question. What's your reaction, Professor Alao, to the federal government's reaction? You just listened to also the Inspector General of Police, Betokun. And does this, in my intro, I asked the question, does this reaction really resonate on ground with the people in Kaduna State, in Zamfara, in Sokoto, in all these other places where these kidnappings are going on?
Thank you for having me forced to begin. I guess, I mean, like every other government, no government whatsoever would like in their domain for this kind of situation to occur. Having said this though, one thing we have to, just like my colleague says, I mean, we need to take security back to local. Local is something very, very local. In a situation whereby you have the chiefs, or the Emir, or the Obas, or what you call them, they need to be empowered in a way. I've been seeing, maybe recently, they're trying to propose the state security. I mean, security is something that has to be local. We need to start from local because, I mean, gathering intelligence, how does these people come here? And from the report you share with the chairman of that local government, if I'm not mistaken, Corriga, it says they have their own vigilante people that goes around and so on and so forth. These are what they need to firstly reinforce. When you see a stranger in your community, this is not a 1 man or 2 man, 3 men. They come in droves. Maybe you see someone strange in the marketplace you've never seen before, is to allow the authority and say, hey, we're having a stranger in our midst. So I believe this should be a starting point. So far, so good. I mean, no ransom should be paid to any because that can only embolden them for the future occurrence.
And you actually bring me to my next question, Professor Alao, the balance between civil defense or like professional security forces. I remember there was an attack in Zamfara State where 60 vigilantes or about that number were killed while courageously attempting to defend their community. They didn't have access to obviously sophisticated weaponry. So given the complexities of this issue, from your expert standpoint, how can the government then effectively balance the need for civilian engagement in security and the overall strategy of professional security forces?
The best approach to me, I believe, it should be a sort of a mesh, whereby there must be a chain of communication between the locals, the state, and the federal. And again, as you mentioned, civil defense, other than civil defense, they all need to work in tandem for the same cause. It's not about being ego that, oh, well, at the end of the day, it's about the security. As they used to say in England, they said we have to be our neighbor's keeper. It means just like the meerkat, whereby security is not a business of one person, not only security professionals alone. I mean, I can remember when you knew in a neighborhood in the West, those retirees, those old women and men, you thought they are reading newspaper. They can easily alert police. Oh, we've seen a stranger. He's been going up and down. We don't know who this person is in our community. I guess this should be a starting point. Not only relying on, okay, well, law enforcement agent, we should take security as a responsibility of every single individual, both young and old.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Would you want to add something?
Yes, I think I totally agree. I mean, one thing that we have noted in the past, which I think the government should really take that into consideration, I'm talking about state governments and local governments, is that vigilantes are like early warning signals. The word vigilante means be vigilant and see something, say something. It is not meant to have vigilantes to take the role of, traditional security agencies, the police or the military. They are meant to work hand in gloves. They are meant to see something, relate that intelligence to the nearest security forces and get those security forces as a backup. Now, the reason why today you see vigilantes carrying arms or asking for arms is because they believe that perhaps by responding to or calling for the presence of traditional security forces, those security forces may not necessarily turn up on time. So they are stepping beyond their bounds. So there are ways that one can structure a very tight-knit security structure from the local government level to the state level. Of course, you have the strategic level at the state, at the federal level. So I think it's important to understand that the role of the vigilantes does not necessarily have to overlap. So it does have to overlap, but it doesn't have to override the role that the police officers play, the role that the military does play. So I think this is where we get it wrong in certain areas where the empowerment of the vigilante is seen as a replacement of the police, the role of the police or the role of the military. So I think there are different ways of doing that, again, which I mentioned earlier on. We've got to go back to the basics where we can empower the traditional authorities, and to a point where they can be the eyes and ears, without the trust and fear that the people do have, which is something we've always had. I mean, traditional authorities were responsible for the decolonization fight. So why do we have to take them out of the equation at this point in time? So we've got to go back to basics and then build that role of the traditional authorities into the role of the vigilantes, who are just merely at the eyes and ears of the community, relay the information to the police brings in the military where there's need for backup. So it's a very tight-knit structure which has to be developed.
Now, these structures that we've been discussing are sort of medium-term, long-term things that can be put together. But what sort of immediate action can be put in place that we can see results sort of right now? And I know security issues really take a long time to materialize when it comes to the outcome. But what sort of immediate action can the federal, state governments, local governments put in place to deter this type of things from happening, or also when it comes to reacting when it actually happens?
I think, for example, when you talk about immediate measures, so for example, people have already been taken. What everyone expects is that the security forces will have to go after the bandits. But the question is, how do you then balance the safety of the victims and a rescue mission? That is a big question which families would be very worried about. I mean, if I am a father of one of those children, I'll be worried about that. So there is the reactive measure, there is the response. I mean, the local government chairman, you interviewed the former local government chairman, made allusion to the fact that yes, you can deploy maybe your the military, as in the case which occurred a couple of days back, where the military was deployed rapidly. As the IG has also mentioned that it's going to deploy a rapid intervention force or something like that. You can deploy that at the point at which these children are being taken. So not wait for them to be taken to whatever forest that may be. So that's one area. Prevention. I mean, the Nigerian government had what you call the Safe School Initiative, and that looked specifically at what? It looked at two things. You look at the threat dynamics within the local government areas. If you understand the threat dynamics, you build on your vulnerabilities. How vulnerable are the schools? I mean, the government has even accepted that about 14 states out of the 36 states, schools are vulnerable and open to attack, by non-state actors. That means we still haven't developed a vulnerability index, on the schools that these bandits do pick up on. Because of course, if you are, if you want to hunt, you better hunt a sheep than hunt a lion. what they're doing is they're taking advantage. So that's why we need protective measures, within these schools, and then early warning signals, which is where the vigilantes come in. But response is always too late, but you require that because people want their children back home.
Professor Alao, what you want to insert? I just wanted to add to that. When you talk about your thoughts on immediate reaction, also talking about the Safe School initiative that was launched really with the promise of protecting our students from harm. What are some of the shortcomings of that initiative?
Well, I guess it doesn't really trickle down. And again, the sustainability is what we lack in this part of the world. Now everybody is watching what is happening in Kaduna. What happened 2 months down the line? Everybody go back about their business. So we want in a situation whereby it's not just a one-time thing, fanfare, whereby everybody comes and speak and talk about it. They might even set up a conference. And after the conference, what happened next? Nothing. Until another, incident occurs. So these are the things, these are the key areas I believe we need to really keep a focus and do something about them.
Another issue I wanted us to discuss is intelligence gathering. These mass abductions, mass killings all over the country has really shown that intelligence gathering response deficiencies in the security systems. What sort of steps can be taken to overhaul that process of intelligence gathering? Professor Alao.
I believe we need to invest more into human resources. I won't say technology this time, but this is by the fact I'm a technology expert. We need to invest more into human intelligence gathering. Because as I said earlier on, before the people came in, they must have seen, these are the people we don't know about in this very community. They must have come with their own reconnaissance, whereby they come and, this is the time to strike. There must have been some people moving up and down.
The former local government chairman actually alluded to the fact that they noticed some people in the community buying things from the markets.
Yeah, that's right.
And so this should have been the time for signs that there's some foreign people going around this community. And does that now leave some sort of responsibility, maybe a little responsibility as well, to the community members, do you think?
And I do agree. In terms of responsibility, community members only report to authorities or local authorities when they do have trust. One. Secondly, when they believe that the information that they're sharing is going to be
encrypted,
anonymous, they will not be identified. Number three, people only report information if they have the belief that that information is going to be acted upon. So intelligence, has a circle, and that circle starts from when you gather that information. Who do you give that information to? How does that individual react to that information? So in a situation where information gets to local authorities or to the police or to any responsible person and that information is not acted upon and acted upon on time, then you find that members of the community become really reluctant to report that information. And it gets worse, whereby members of the communities are attacked. Because the source of that information somehow is leaked by those who were supposed to handle that information. And we saw that a lot during the counterinsurgency operations in the Northeast. So you do not want to have a community that is more fearful of the bandits than it does trust the local authorities. So you've got to have that balance between fear and trust. And where fear supersedes trust, as is the case, you'd have very few people coming to report information to the local authorities or to the police. There has been very much accusations by some of the communities, for example, in the Boko's case, where local authorities or local individuals said they did send information to some of the authorities. That information was not acted upon on time. Some of the information was not acted upon at all. So this is where we talk about the restoration of the local authorities, that trust. As long as that baseline, that foundation of community trust is not there, the government is going to have a very hard time, to deal with these local issues.
Professor Alao, you wanted to add to what David Otto was saying.
Well, exactly. As I use the word meerkat, you have to, the best, which is the one that lives in, when someone strange enters into your community, it's so very easy to say, oh, look, I haven't seen this place before. I haven't said this. Another thing I would like to touch on, like the vigilantes. I mean, are they truly being emboldened in their work because they're putting their life in the risk?
Yes.
It's very obvious. Everybody knows this gentleman is a vigilante. I mean, who is watching the watcher? So this kind of approach also need to be visited. Again, one thing I would like to touch on is quite absurd to move 200 over able bodies.
287.
How? With which sort of transportations? These are, I mean, among them women, vulnerable kids, and so on and so forth. I believe every single day, every single minute counts in terms of after they've been kind of like, adopted. Did we have the forensics coming to the ground and to kind of like analyze and,
what happened,
how it happens, and did they come the area to see? So these are the things I believe we're supposed to be. By now, the law enforcement agent should know, they should be able to pinpoint, because there's no how they won't leave their tracks behind, leaving the crime scene.
This brings me to my next question. When it comes to communication, by now there should have been some sort of preliminary investigation, and we should have more information on how it happened, when it happened, how long it took, how they came, how they went.
Something I would like to that might not really connected the way we analyze. I guess that must have been like a week ago. They say they busted one of the food silos or storage and so on and so forth. Did anybody track? Is it just everyday people that went and break this storage? Where does the food end? So those are the things. It's more, all these things are interconnected, but fail of not really analyzing what needs to be analyzed. This is where we are. To feed 280 people, I don't think they must have a full storage park somewhere to feed these people. So these are the things they need to see. If someone just come and order something beyond what's supposed to, having a truck of, we want to buy not just a sack of rice, but
bags,
hundreds bags. They're supposed to, for what? Where does this lead to? So these are the things we're supposed to, the security agencies to look into, and that very area,
to
because they must fit to connect the dot. Thank you. Because to feed 200 people, I don't think something really is something really. It takes a lot of logistics.
Yes.
To fill their.
What are your thoughts on that, David Otto? Because to move 287 people, including themselves, the kidnappers, it's a lot. Did they come in cars, in motorcycles, in a trucks, in a bus? The trucks don't move that fast. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think, it's a logistical nightmare, but it tells you one thing, how organized these groups are. So we're talking about organized crime, which is very disorganized in the sense that you do not know where it's going to happen, but you know that when it happens, they will succeed. Now, we've looked at more than 20 mass kidnappings that have occurred within the country in the past year, in the past 10 years. And we have developed trends and patterns, which is what you mentioned about how they operate. And we have come up with ways of combating that. We've set up this consortium, and I'm sure that perhaps it will be an opportunity for some of the authorities to have a look at that. That kind of a structure and that kind of an approach, which would also include a very strategic role that traditional rulers should play, is inclusive of that. We have seen that the manner in which these kidnappings are happening, it will even get worse if nothing is done in terms of trying to cut that main artery. I'm not just talking about removing the oxygen, which is the money, following the money, which has been in the middle of that, because most of these kidnappings are kidnapping for ransom, not exclusively all, but most of them are kidnapping for ransom, and that ransom requires that the government pays money to these individuals. So we're coming up with very comprehensive ways of dealing with this. Unfortunately, we cannot disclose that, at this point in time, because of course, both the good, the bad, and the ugly are listening to these conversations. But in answering your question, there are established patterns. From 2014 in Chibok, we thought that was just a one-off case, but we've had more than 20 cases of that kind of mass kidnapping happen. And what we've done is we've looked at the what we call the ecosystem of the current trend of kidnapping, and we've come up with some measures. And I think, it would be interesting to discuss that at some point when it begins to bear some fruits on ground.
And we'd like to have you to discuss that when you can actually give us more information. Now, talking about some preventive measures, there's been this notion of, okay, maybe we should relocate some of these schools, they're in vulnerable areas. How is this sort of a viable solution, or does it really sidestep the underlying issues of our national security, Professor Alao?
Well, that might be a premature approach, if I should say. We don't need to relocate, we don't need to budge because of the terrorist. I mean, the life and property, everyone should be sacrosanct within our Commonwealth, Nigeria. So, like saying we need to, that means we're caving in to these bad guys. So that won't be the best approach. As he rightly said, I mean, there are things we can't really not just, put to the air because both bad and the ugly, good and bad and the uglies are listening. But again, there's a sort of trend that I've been collating the last 10 years or so, I believe, which I believe it will be of interest of the law enforcement agents that might be they should have now, from this very sort of a tool, can tell where they might strike next. So by so doing, instead of reactive, it might be proactive. So I guess it's something that we need to really, look into.
David, Otto, in reacting to that, do you think it's time for Nigeria to maybe create a hostage rescue unit and train people to actually work in that sort of unit when things like this happen?
Well, I think, you're diving right into my mind in terms of, some of the things that we will be putting on, on the table. You've got to be able to understand the dynamics of what is going on and the trend, as I mentioned earlier on. And I think having a special unit that is responsible for these kind of incidents, would be very critical. Because rescue and kidnapping and negotiation is a specialized skill that requires specialized individuals, not just anyone who believes that, because, they're a traditional ruler or they have affiliation within the communities, it means that, contact with the bandits equates that to the ability to negotiate. When you're dealing with sophisticated groups, as we have been able to map, not just that fact, but the fact that the heat map of kidnapping within the country spreads across. Even within the FCT, you have kidnappings happening. It therefore means that you've got to be able to have a national focused strategy that should be able to deal with these issues. The reason why security evolves is because criminals also evolve, and the government cannot be left behind. The government must always be steps ahead of the criminals. So there are ways that this can work. We've seen them work in other countries. Of course, Nigeria has its peculiarities, but in terms of how you can, you can tweak that into the Nigerian environment, we've come up with some ways to do that. So I think, in general, yes, you can have a special squad, but how you train them, what kind of, role that they play, does matter. It's not just that. We're not taking away the role of the vigilantes, because again, as I mentioned earlier on, the vigilantes come from the word be vigilant and report information. They are the primary source of intelligence. So are the traditional rulers, who are the primary thrust of building trust within communities. So we've got to look at all those dynamics. And even when you have, for example, a special hostage unit within each state, you still need the role of these respective entities, because it's what we call a horizontal approach. It's not a vertical approach where you just have one responsible unit. You need to have all the other elements and all the other institutional representations to be hands on deck, to deal with this issue.
Let's talk about accountability after all this has happened. Terrible incidents across the country. It seems to be a recurring issue in managing and also preventing security breaches. Who do you believe should be held accountable, and what mechanisms should be put in place to ensure that those who are responsible for some sort of security lapses actually face the consequences? Professor Alao, you can go first.
I mean, in any civilized society, police come first.
Yes.
It's the work of the police, but police can't do it alone. That's why they need the locals. As he rightly said, the vigilantes. When we say vigilantes, not those ones in uniform. Even the market women should be part of the vigilantes fabric. Why? For those one, as I mentioned, those one going to the marketplace to buy, even the taxi driver, the bus driver, these are part of the community. When they see strangers coming in, they should be able to say, oh, we haven't seen this set of people, we haven't seen these volumes of purchase in the last 2, 3, or 4, 5 years. How come all of a sudden? So these are the things, these are the telltale signs that they just need to put the dot. All need to be trained. They need to be trained and trained and trained, not just a one-time thing. Police need to be retrained. They need to be inclined to the new reality in front of our eyes. So I don't, well, at the same time, I can't put it squarely to other, I mean, like military going, I will say kudos to them for, I mean, their rapid response, but at the same time, it all go back again to the police. It's the work of the police.
Yeah, David.
And I think I agree with Professor Alao, but, you know, I also believe that the fish rots from the head. The president is the commander-in-chief of armed forces. Therefore, he has the overall, you know, responsibility for the security of Nigerians. So when things like this happen, the president must first take the blame. Then you move down to the heads of security. Perhaps, you know, you've got to bring in the national security advisor because he's responsible for advising the president on matters related to national security. So he has to also be looking at, you know, what is it that is going wrong. You move to the service chiefs, you know, who are responsible for, you know, the protecting the integrity and the territorial integrity of the state and the national borders. Then you move to the communities and the states, the chief operation security officers of the state, the governors. Where does the responsibility lie? The traditional authorities. But you and I, as Nigerians, as citizens, must also take responsibility because the country belongs to you. It belongs to us. Therefore, if there is anything that is going wrong in the country, see something and say something. The responsibility must move from the top to the bottom, not the bottom to the top. So the commander-in-chief must take the biggest responsibility.
And finally, gentlemen, let's talk about the victims and also the families of these victims after such experiencing such terrible incidents. Let's talk about their mental health. What can be done to help these people after they're rescued, and also family members that have been left behind that don't have their fathers, don't have their husbands, don't have their mothers, their wives, their children, babies? What can be done to help with their mental health? David Otto.
Well, I think, you know, it has to, again, you know, when it comes to the psychological impact of this kind of incident, it's not just the victims. I mean, you can imagine children who are between the age of 5 to 11, I mean, or 12. These are very innocent kids. You know, you're going to worry about their well-being. How is this going to impact on their psychology? So we are talking about a whole psychological operation to ensure that, you know, these children, you know, begin to see life as normal once they are released. Now, we're talking about the trauma which they're going to be experiencing, not just the children. You move now to the parents. It is devastating to have your child being taken away by a non-state actor or anyone that, you know, that is not a responsible adult. So that psychological impact also goes to the parents. It goes to the community. I mean, these children are taken away from a community, which means that the community has an impact. Who is going to want to send their child to that school that, you know, bandits have just walked in and collected, you know, 200 and something plus children and disappear in thin air? So the entire community is psychologically impacted. The entire educational system is psychologically impacted because nobody wants to study in an environment where the next thing you could hear is jump into the van and you're off into the bushes. So, you know, in terms of the psychological impact of these kind of incidents, and I said to you, it's not the first since 2014 with Chibok, then the question is, you know, how badly hurt is the psychology of the Nigerian population?
Before we go, just a quick word from Professor Alao, 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, the whole community has to, thank goodness here in Nigeria, we have a true social community cohesion in terms of support, be the churches, the mosque, the prayer group, and so on and so forth. We are people of we are believers. I believe the church has a lot of roles to play in this very, so as well as the mosque. I believe Nigeria is so resilient. In no time, I believe it's something of the past. But again, this shouldn't reoccur. This is what we should be talking about, the aftermath.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here with me. Well, you've had it here on Arise Prime Time, and that's it for us today. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.